Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to this week's video. In this week's video we're going to be taking a look at decal footsteps, and I'll give you a quick example of what that looks like. So these decal footsteps do follow the rotation of the player's feet. I've put a few limitations in there, sort of like speed. So if the character's not moving at a certain speed, that they won't generate. So if you do little micro movements, maybe slightly lighter than that, the footsteps don't apply. But as soon as you start picking up any type of speed, they will then start to appear. They do follow the character's foot rotation, so that's fine. And they only apply if your foot is a certain height off the ground. These are all set as variables, so you can configure it to how you like. Just so then footsteps don't apply whilst you're in midair. They do also match to the angle of the surface that you're walking on, and they do also slowly fade away. So as you see that the footsteps do then disappear. Obviously this footstep has been made with the specific decal that I've picked, which I will leave a link to the footstep that I used. But this can be configured to any footstep really. So with all that being said, let's jump into it and let's see how it's made. Okay, so I've completely wiped the blueprint now. So essentially what this is just a third person template. This is just a plain third person template. And what I've done is I've opened up the third person character blueprint, and then we can just get started. So one thing I did mention is that I've set this up with my own sort of footprint. Essentially what that is let me just open up a browser here. So essentially what I've done is I've just gone and got just a random footprint like that. Any footprint will do, so you can use any of these. If you get a single, you can just flip it, which is fine, but you can download any of these, even this, and if you just cut it in half and go around it, that'll work fine as well. And then once you've downloaded it, just drag it straight into the content browser, and then you'll get something that looks like this. I can delete that one actually, because that one was just a test. Let's get rid of that. So essentially I just got the same picture and I just flipped it around. So you, oh, let's not do that. What are we doing? I'm messing this up now. So you can see my left and right foot, it's basically the same picture, it's just completely flipped. And then what I've done is when I've brought it into Unreal, mine actually had a white background around it, and don't worry about whether it's got a background or not. Granted, if you do get one with a background, you probably want a clear background, or not clear, sorry, a solid colour. So you can see here that my footprint's black with a white background. So all I've done is opening up your image, you'll get this adjustments panel on the right. Now one of them features is chroma key texture, so you can tick that, and then essentially this may be a pink box by default. If you click on the colour like that, you can get this little dropper tool. You can click on that and then select the area that you want to remove. So for me was white, so I press that, hit OK, and you can see that now the background has been removed. Now granted it hasn't left a slight white outline, but you can adjust this threshold and you can get it nice and close, or too extreme. But I didn't mind the white outline. It gave the footprint in the Unreal sort of example map a bit more character, so I ended up keeping it. And then what I also did is, so then the footprints weren't solid white on the solid black on the ground. There's a minimum and maximum alpha. Alpha is just essentially the opacity. So if you change this to 0.8, you can see that it becomes somewhat transparent, and for me that just gave it a bit more of an original feel in the world, because it's not a solid colour. And essentially you just want to do that with both. And if you just take note as well, as you can see here on my mouse cursor, it says displayed, basically 216 by 526. When you are doing the scale of your decal, when we get to that bit, just be aware that obviously it's taller than it is wide, so you may just need to adjust the scale figure to make it look right. Because if you just set your scale to 1 by 1, it'll try and make it square, and it'll make your footstep a lot shorter. But I'll give you an example of that later. Okay, so into the blueprint. So what we need to do is we need to do a check to see where our foot is. If it's in the run cycle, if we just press play here, every time our character runs, at some point the left and the right foot makes contact with the ground during the run cycle. Every other time the foot's going to be in the air doing the run cycle, then it hits the ground and it's doing the run cycle. So we need to check every so often how far our foot is from the ground, and if our foot is sort of like a centimetre from the ground, or 0 for example, or less than 10 centimetres, let's say, we're going to consider it close enough to have a footprint display on the floor. So for us to do that check, I'm going to do an event begin play, which is going to be sort of like our starting trigger. And then from that, I'm going to do an event timer. So this is a set timer by event. And my timer is going to be triggered every 0.2 seconds. I'm going to loop it, and we don't need to change any of these other settings. Now the event that we want to fire is going to be a custom event. And I'm going to call this check ground left. So it's going to be our left foot, and this is going to be us checking for the ground. Now, one thing to help us out is we're going to be making this system with a line trace. Now, if I was to get the actual foot itself, which if we go into the skeleton, which if you don't know how to get to, if you select your mesh on the left hand side, and then over on the right hand side you should see your skeletal mesh, and if you're using Unreal 5 like I am, you'll have the Quinn. If not, you'll have the Unreal Mannequin. Just press this little search icon here, and that'll take you to your content browser. And then typically in the same folder you'll have the skeleton. If you don't, you can open up your skeletal mesh and click on the skeleton up at the top, and then you'll have the same thing as I do. Then on the left hand side you should have sort of like the bone or socket manager, and then you can select these body parts then to get each part. So there's a bone called foot L, and there's also another bone called foot R. And if we get a bit closer, what you'll see is these bones are inside the actual skeletal mesh itself. So if we get that location and fire a line trace out of it, technically the line trace is going to start inside the body. So to combat that, what I've actually thought of a better idea, which helped me out, is if I just get a small mesh or just some placeholder underneath our character to fire the trace from, we can guarantee that we're underneath the foot. So what I did is I just used a sphere collider, and I'm just going to call this one sphere L, and I'm actually going to reduce the size down to like 0.1 because we don't want it visible, and make sure that's uniform, so that's ticked. And then which one is going to be the left foot? It's going to be this one. So now what I want to do is I'm actually going to parent the socket of this one to foot L. Now there is a foot L socket here which I've not actually used last time. I actually used foot L, which I'm going to use this time just in case that causes me to have an issue, but I can't imagine it will, looking at the positioning of it. But I'm just going to pick foot L, which looks exactly the same, to be honest. And then I'm just going to move the sphere down by 10. So you can see now that that sphere is definitely underneath the foot. So if I fire a line trace from this position downwards, obviously when that's 0 or something like that, we've got to be touching the ground. So that's my ground checker sort of object. And while we're here, what we may as well do is we may as well duplicate that one, and we'll put R. And what we'll do is we'll change this to foot R. Now, I did have an issue here. So it seems to flip the mesh upside down by duplicating it for some reason. So that's currently -10. So for this foot, for some reason, it has to be +10. Now, without looking too much into why that is, if you do know why that's happened, please put a comment down below. I'd be interested to know why that happens. It's probably to do with the coordinate system changing, but I don't know, it's just a guess. But yeah, so let's move on. So we've got two spheres now, one sphere R, one sphere L, and we've got the two places we can fire a line trace from. So in the event graph now, what we want to do, so for our ground check, what we want to do is we want to get a line trace by channel. And for our line trace, we have a start position and an end position. So our start position is going to be our sphere L, and we're going to get its world location. And that's pretty much it for our start. And then for our end location, essentially what we need to do is we just need to figure out which way is up for our character, and we just want to reverse that, so we go down. So let's get our actor location. Let's get our actor. Oh, what's going on? Get actor, and then it's up. Our up vector. If you've ever got a forward vector, which is typically more commonly used, essentially the up vector is just which way is up rather than forward. And then to flip this around, if you negate this, essentially this just times the whole lot by -1, and it just flips everything upside down. Then we're going to want a distance. So essentially we've got our direction down, but we need to sort of add some distance onto that down, because we're going to go from the foot down by a certain amount. Now, realistically, we don't want to go too far with this, so if we just select a pretty small number like 100, you know, we're only planning on putting a footprint on the floor if we're within 10 centimeters or 10 units. So checking 100 is pretty overkill, but you know, you could use this line trace to double for other things as a ground checker if you want to. Anyway, so with that being said, what we need to do now is add these two together, and then that gives us our end position, and we can just try and make this a little bit more compact. That's nice. Okay, so our line trace is going to remain as a visible line trace, but we are going to set the draw debug to for duration, and I'm going to have this set to, we'll leave it at 5 for now just for testing, and we're going to leave the colours exactly the same. So at the moment now, if we just test this, we should see out of our left foot a line trace hitting the ground every time we run, which is working fine, and you can see there the length of that 100. So there is quite a lot of check there, but it doesn't really matter. So that's working fine, that's great, that's as we expected. So now we've got a check for our foot. Now what we could do is we could start making the other foot at the same time and go through both of them at the same time. What I'm probably going to do is just make the left, copy it all, paste it, change what we need to for the right. Right, so let's continue. So what we need to do now is we need to actually break our hit result. So what this is going to do is this is going to give us some extra information of what location did we hit, what was the normal, which is kind of like what's the angle of the surface you've hit, what's the distance, how close was it. So that distance is going to be very useful for us, because we can say if our distance is sort of less than or equal to 10, then we want to do a footstep. So that's the first thing we're probably going to do. So let's do less than or equal to, and I'm going to use 10 because that's the number that I found was quite nice in my testing. But again, what we're going to do is we'll probably promote this to a variable and put this as max step height, something like that. And you can set this to whatever you want after the fact. And let's just place that up there so it doesn't look as bad. And let's do a branch. So if our if our max step height is less than or equal to 10, then we can spawn a decal. So let's do that. Spawn decal at location. Now, for us to spawn a decal, we're actually going to need to make one. So let's just go to our content drawer, and let's go to our content. Now, this is the decal material that I made earlier. So I'll just open that up, and it's very simple. Actually, no, I'm sorry. That's the testing one that I made. So we've got left shoe print and right shoe print decals. And again, these are very simple. We just got a texture coordinate, which is just left as 1 by 1. We've then got a texture sample node, which just takes in our picture, and then our base material here, which has been set to deferred decal. The blend mode is translucent, and the shading mode is default lit. So just quickly, what I will do is I'll just make a new one, a new material. I'll just put example shoe. I'll open that up. Now, with this center node selected, we want to change the material domain to deferred decal. You want to change the blend mode to translucent, and default lit was already selected for me, but you can just double check that. Now, what we need is a texture sample. Get that in, and you don't necessarily need this, but you can get in a texture coordinate as well. But we are literally not changing the texture coordinate at all, so it shouldn't make that much of a difference. And in the preview, I'm just going to select plain, just because it displays a little bit more naturally as a decal would. So now with the texture sample, the RGB is going to be our base color, and our A is going to be our opacity. And then with the texture sample selected, on the left hand side you can see texture. Under none, you select either your left or your right foot, depending on which one that you're making. If you select the left, that's fine. Then you're going to file, not file, you want to save this and make your right shoe. I was going to say file, save as, and save it as a left shoe, but you should have already renamed it left and right. And this will work just as you'd expect. So if we flick over to the other one now, it looks exactly the same. You just get this kind of like opacity blob. Now it's blob shaped because naturally it wants to square the image, and this is where we're going to make the changes in the spawn just so it stretches right. So we'll close that and we'll go back to here. So now we've got a shoe left, or our example shoe, either one. I can't remember, did I pick the left one? Or I hope so. So I've picked example shoe just to show that it does work, and it's exactly the same. And then our decal size. Now you'll have to play around with this because it really does depend on the texture image that you've got. But for my texture image on the X, I had 10. I had 10 on the Y just because it looks weird if I don't. And then 5 is my width. So my X is longer and my Z is narrower, and that just makes mine display better. What I'd probably start with is 10, 10, 10. See how it looks, and then just mess around with these values until it looks more right. I can't really give you the right number for your texture because it really does depend on the resolution of the image you use. But I can at least lead you to trying to get it right. So for the location, our location, we're just going to have straight on the impact point. Essentially, this is the location in the world that the line trace hit. That's a pretty good place to put it. However, the rotation is a little bit more complicated. So for our rotation, what we want to do is we want to get the normal, which again is kind of like the angle of the surface that you've hit. But what we want to do is we actually want to flip this, so we want to negate this vector. After you negate the vector, you want to get the X rotation or the X vector. So rotation from X vector. However, we don't want all of this this value. We actually want to split this because we want to take only the pitch from this. So really, we only want the pitch for the angle of which to put the decal. And excuse me, for us to get the rotation, we're going to need to get that bone name of our foot. So what we can do is let's drag in our mesh from the left. Drag our mesh in. You can get socket rotation. Now the socket name is I tell you what, let's find it. If you open up your skeletal mesh again, so you can click this, open up your mesh, and then we're going to go to the skeleton. And if we have a look, so we've got foot L, and you can see here the rotations are kind of like 0, -2.5, 0. So they're pretty much 0 in terms of how far out they are. Now, if I go to preview animation and I find the idle, well, who are we? Are we Manny female? You can see now that the angle of this foot is 7. These are kind of quite low, at -5. Okay, it's subtly changed. But then if we look at the other foot, which looks a little bit more twisted, the right foot, you can see that this is 17. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to take the foot R's angle, because depending on how the animation might twist your feet or what have you, the angle of your footprint should be more accurate. So we're going to get foot R. So in this socket name, now this is case sensitive, so you need to make sure that it's right. If you do run into any issues, what you can do is when you've got the bone selected, it says bone name up at the top, you can right click and copy that, and that saves you making any mistakes. Just double click this text until it goes blue, press paste, and you shouldn't have any issues then. Once you've got that, let's right click on this return value and let's split it, because we only want the yar. With the yar, we're actually going to we're actually going to subtract and then -90 from it. And then what we need to do now is we need to, from the rotator, we need to make a rotator, which is at the bottom. And we're only going to fill in the pitch and the yar. We're going to leave the roll as 0. So let's plug that in, and let's plug our pitch in from here. So now with all these together, we should have our angle and our rotation. So this in theory should work. The only thing I'm concerned about is this happens every 0.2 seconds, and we've not told it to only put 1 decal. So we could end up with a lot more than we want here. But you can see every time my character stops, it takes that angle of the shoe when I run forward. Apart from the line trace covering the footsteps, that looks pretty cool. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to have our line trace stop for a second, just so I can get a better idea of what's going on. So I can see here as I'm running. So I could see there that because I've not put in any system to say only produce 1, that I've actually printed 2 footsteps in one place there. So a nice easy fix for that would to just be setting a do once, and then obviously this needs to be reset, and we can say when it's false, reset this do once, which means my foot's gone back into the cycle and I'm only going to do 1 at a time. So now if I hit compile, I shouldn't receive that error again. Not error, that bug. I shouldn't ever spawn more than 1 footprint at a time, or at least in a cycle. So that seems about right. And also if you want to limit the fact that it can do footprints when you're barely moving, let's just add in another quick check, let's say. So character movement, drag that in. We can get velocity. And then we can, is it normal? No, I used get vector length, not normalize. So get vector length, and if this vector length is greater than or equal to, I'm just going to go 10 again. Greater than or equal to 10 branch. So essentially, only if my velocity is greater than 10 do I want to produce a decal footprint. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to stack these on top of each other, just because they're slightly there's quite a lot of stuff there to sort of put all the way down here. So what have we got here now? So we spawned a decal, we're getting the rotation, we only do it once, and we only do it if our velocity is higher. So all that's missing now is the second foot. So pretty much we're going to replicate all of that. We're just going to change a couple of things. To be fair, we're even going to copy. No, I'm going to hold. So because of the way I selected everything, then I've selected my event timer. I'm just going to hold Control and deselect that. I've pressed Control C, so I've copied everything. And then essentially what I need to do is, after this timer is started, let's do another event timer. And exactly the same, 0.2 seconds. We want this to be looping. We don't want to change anything else. And the event that we want to call is going to be a custom event. And this one's going to be check ground R. Now, obviously, I'm going to quickly run out of space. So let's just select everything again. And I'm going to deselect all the things I don't want to move. And then I'm just going to drag all this down. Tell you what, I'm going to move that with it. And then there should be enough space. Now, if you've still got all that copied, you may as well just press Control and copy again. And then I'm going to paste it. I'm going to plug this in, move it up slightly, just so it looks a bit nicer. And then, to be honest, I'm going to move that back. But anyway, enough with the niceties. What we need to change is the sphere L at the beginning. We want to change that to sphere R. And then going down, let's just check. Yeah, that's fine. So instead of foot R here, we want foot L. Foot L. And it's still minus 90, that's fine. And then obviously I had the example shoe, which was my left. I'm now going to need to change this to, let's say, shoe R. And then just for the sake of it, I'm just going to change this one now to shoe L. And then that, in theory, should be it. So let's press play, let's start running. And you can see that both of the footprints are producing. And actually, one of them feet are backwards. So my left foot is fine, but my right foot is not. So, oh, actually, I believe for the right foot, I actually did a plus on the right foot. So for the yaw, we do plus 90. And then if this doesn't work, I'm going to have to pause and see what I've done wrong. But I think that was the thing. So there we go. Now the foot is the right way around. Again, I think that is because of the flip sphere. Not 100% sure, but that's how you get it to work. So you can see now that the footprints are being produced as we run along. And then where I've caught up here, they are not despawning. Oh yeah, we're missing a couple of things here, so I do apologise for this. But last but not least, lifespan. If you want your footsteps to disappear after they've been placed in the world, you want to set a lifespan. So you can mess with this however you want. 5 seconds is pretty good for me, so I'm going to set lifespan on both of them. Now, if you want them to share a lifespan, you could just promote this to a variable and have them both shared, so you have them the same. But there we go. So there's the footprints that spawn in the world, and then after 5 seconds, they start to disappear. So that's it. there's your footprints. I hope that was useful. I hope this system's decent for your games. One thing that I'd be aware of is obviously the texture that you pick. What you could do is, if you've got physics materials in your game, so if like dirt, concrete, wood, you could have different decals spawn depending on the different sort of terrain that you're walking on based on physics materials. What I'd say is, as you change terrain, this footstep might need to change how it appears, and that's one way that you can do it. And obviously the size of your texture. So for example, mine was for the left foot, where did I put it? Mine is 231 by 531. If you get a larger or a smaller or a more square shoe, or if yours is on the left or the right, whereas mine's vertical, you may need to adjust those rotation factors to compensate for that. But again, I'm getting into things here. If you run into any issues, please leave a comment down below. Alternatively, you can contact me on Discord, which my link is just down below. If this did help, please consider giving a like or leaving a comment saying thanks. And if you've watched a couple of my videos now and you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I'm going to try and get to 1,000 by the end of the year. We're so close. We're almost at 800 now. So that'd be great if we could do that. But enough talking from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another video.